All right. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. Well, Josh, welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. And, just to reintroduce, we're here to talk about AI and autonomy in the ground domain. Josh and I were catching up a little bit earlier. Josh is a Texas guy, and I was telling him all I really know about Texas is either from Landman or Friday Night Lights, and I actually walked outside earlier, and all I saw were Waymos, which is really funny to kind of have a conversation about ground autonomy, and you see 10 Waymos in the
This is the unique part of Texas. I'm from West Texas.
Yeah.
Friday Night Lights and Landman is really where I came from.
Maybe I need to...
But we're now finding ourselves in this unique part of Texas that is a tech hub, so it's good to see.
Well, it's great, and I was also going to make a University of Texas joke, but you're a Texas A&M and Texas Tech guy, so I can't go there.
The other two universities. So.
Well, anyways, we'll get into the topic. Again, I'm Billy Mitchell, executive editor of Scoop News Group. Under that umbrella is our Defense Scoop publication, which I play a role in, and we closely follow the recent explosion in AI and autonomy in defense. And I wanted to give a shout out to the SCSP team for having us here, Tara, Luke, Illy, and Ilbert for having us, but Josh as well for taking the time to speak with me. It's really a privilege to sit down with you and discuss how AI and autonomy are transforming ground-based operations. So as we've heard today, there's really this long, storied history of autonomy, both in the defense space, but the commercial space. And I know you guys serve both of those markets, but I want to start with the defense side and how it's really evolved over the last few decades. I know it's not new, as we all might think it is, with how much it's exploded. So let's start there. I mean, this is a decades-old sort of trajectory. So tell me how we've gotten to this point, because we hear a lot about the air and the sea domains, but maybe not always as much about the ground side of things. So walk me through that.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, and I know we're in the post-lunch hour, so we'll try to keep this interesting and exciting. I was actually surprised at how long the ground autonomy domain had been a thing. I joined our company in 2021. We were founded by this gentleman, Alberto Lacaze, who had dedicated really the past 25, almost 30 years in developing self-driving technology specifically for warfighters. I'll give you a quick vignette example. As I was walking through the interview with the founder, we were going through the lobby of the office, and they had a big television screen on the wall showing all the greatest hits, the highlight reels of what the company had done over the last 20 years in ground robotics and autonomy. And this video pops up, and it's a Stryker convoy, a full three vehicle Stryker convoy, driving probably 30, 40 miles an hour on a dirt road. And I looked at Alberto, I was like, hey, are those autonomous? He's like, oh yeah, we automated those. I was like, that's amazing. There's autonomous Strykers? He's like, well, that was in 2004. I nearly fell on the ground. I was in Iraq in 2003 and 2007. I was like, I was overseas. I would have given anything to have that capability in those vehicles. Well, how well did they work? It's like, oh, they work great. Well, what happened? It's like, well, Valley of Death, DoD's hard to sell to, it's complicated. The next video reel pops up. Humvees driving in Afghanistan. It was like, hey, that's Afghanistan, right? I was like, yeah, Afghanistan. It's like, and those Humvees are running autonomously, right? He's like, yeah. It's like, okay, great. Like this got deployed. Like these, it's like, yeah, we drove about 2,000 or 3,000 autonomous miles ahead of the mine clearing operation, took humans out of harm's way. I was like, okay, great. It's like, yeah, and then the Army pulled the safety release because we went around the program office, found OCO money and some IRAD and deployed it overseas, and it wasn't in line with the acquisition strategy, so they pulled the vehicles out. And I was like, wait, and then they put humans back in Humvees. He's like, yeah. And they went and cleared mines with humans in the vehicle. It's like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'm in. I will be the janitor. I will take out the trash, whatever I need to come in here and make sure this technology gets deployed. But if you look at the main seminal moment for ground autonomy and robotics, everybody can reference back to the DARPA Grand Challenge. And if you trace all the Waymos running on the street and the cruise vehicles and all the robotaxis and all the on-road trucking, I think if you look at the company lineage and the leadership lineage, they all started around 2004, probably as undergrads at a university in the DARPA Grand Challenge. And this is really a bringing together of a lot of innovators in the space that really demonstrated technology at the time for self-driving and what it could do in an operational environment. And from there, you had an explosion of startups and companies back in the 2006, 2007 through kind of 2016 timeframe. I think when you look at what transpired there is all of those companies started in defense and then left the industry. They went and started robotaxi companies and on-road trucking companies and all these other companies where really, when you look at today, one of the biggest demands and needs is really in the defense industry. And then the question is, well, why did they leave? And I think, when you look at really where this resurgence of autonomy and AI and tech has really come from, it's from this injection of capital, venture capital, private equity, investment to develop products. That investment really follows where markets are buying products. And you've really seen that emerge recently. But if you go back to the 04-05 timeframe, the Department of Defense, now Department of War, was not focused on buying products. They were focused on experimenting and really not focused on how do we deploy this to service a warfighter, but how do we examine what's in the art of the possible. So it's been a long road. I think you can look back online and find requirements from DARPA in the late 80s of what ground vehicles should do. And so we've come a long way. And really today there are, I don't know if anybody's aware of it, but hundreds of autonomous vehicles that are deployed with the Army and the Marines today. And that's just getting increased going forward.
Well, it's very fascinating. You mentioned a lot of things that I think we'll pull on throughout the conversation, from the VC element to the way that the Department of War now is thinking about buying commercially and changing the way it's thinking about buying products and technology in specific. But where I wanted to start the conversation was, again, we hear a lot about the air systems in particular, and we see other installations doing things in the Pacific with the vessels in the sea. What's the difference between those and in terms of challenges that ground autonomy faces? I mean, I'm sure that's a clear reason why some of that departure happened during that time period, because there were some unique challenges that those companies faced. But, what are the different operating constraints and things that you guys are dealing with that maybe those in the airspace, in the sea space aren't?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are probably intuitive. You have a really big sky in a little airplane, or a really big ocean, a really big flat two-dimensional ocean in a boat. But that's not to minimize the challenges that our sister companies focusing in other domains are dealing with. But in the ground domain, you're really driving on an obstacle. An Earth that has a lot of features and terrain that are ever-changing, different obstacles. But really the challenge and what we focus on is really around that warfighter, that individual soldier, Marine, Lance Corporal, Specialist that has that mission on the ground that's probably, it looks a lot different. And they're interfacing with that technology in a hands-on way, really in a visual way, I need to send this over that hill, I need this thing to support the action that I'm doing. And so it requires a very tight coordination. Well, one, dealing with the complicated terrain and being able to do whatever it is that vehicle can do, but also deliver that capability or payload either in direct support of that soldier or Marine that's on the ground that has an immediate mission to go do, or to support some other strategic or operational, either fires or sensing. But it's really on the ground at the tactical edge, and it's a persistent capability that's out there, not either flying overhead on station and back off station, or out in the ocean. It is really in and amongst the troops on the ground, really supporting the operations that they're doing. So it creates some unique challenges, both on the systems integration side, on the user interface side, on the data situation awareness side, because when you're in these tight confined areas, or even in battle spaces, understanding where you are, where the robots are, what you need them to go do in these tightly coordinated areas becomes critically important.
So with that in mind, what is Forterra's place in this market? You mentioned there's others out there, and there's sort of this shift back, this moment in this sort of signal from the U.S. military and the Department of War that this is the way going forward. So there's obviously going to be other players, but you're trying to fill a specific gap in this marketplace, and I'm curious what that is.
Yeah, well, I'll give you the one example. I think unlike commercial autonomy and the Waymo, the driving autonomously from point A to point B isn't the so what. If I get in a Waymo, I want to go from this location to that location. I want it done safely and reliably. I don't want to get lost. I don't want to get in an accident. Those are all givens. In a military context, it's the enablement of that mission, either delivering effects, sensors, payloads, doing a resupply, a casualty evacuation, putting a fires platform on the edge. You're doing that self-driving robotic AI autonomy portion in order to achieve a mission, in order to deliver a capability. And so what we think about is focusing on that in-state capability, and not just us delivering a product that does that, but really enabling a partnership and ecosystem of best-of-breed capabilities that need to make it to the warfighter on the ground. If you think of what you need with a drone or a fires payload or a remote weapon station, you need onboard power, you need compute, you need some kind of command, control, and communications capability, and you need that to be mobile and expeditionary. That's essentially what you have out of the box with an autonomous system. And we look at it as how do we pull those partners, teams, capability providers on top of that vehicle platform and allow that to be deployed in a mission critical way that's relevant, easy to use, reliable, and isn't going to get stuck, isn't going to have comms failures, and enable that warfighter to do that mission. So the best analogy I can give is we all have cell phones in our pockets. Generally what it is, it's a little mini box of compute with some sensors on it and some software connected to command and control systems. I had no idea that my iPhone with the 3 cameras on it, why would I ever need 3 cameras? I had no idea until I took my 3 kids on the walk through the forest and I said, hey kids, freeze, let me take a picture. And I look at my camera and it's this amazing depth perception and all the things that I wouldn't know how to do as a photographer. And I said, that's why that's there. And when you're thinking about what an 18 to 24-year-old's gonna need on the battlefield, and the products and technology that are delivered, you have to be forward-thinking, you have to be continuously innovating about what that product's gonna need to do in the next fight. I think there was a comment earlier, comparing Ukraine and putting the spools of fiber optic on there, and yes, you have to do the quick, fast thing, but then you also have to think about the next capability and the next system, and what does that need to look like? Our view is you have to do both of those in parallel, and that feedback loop between the quick, easy, fast thing that you deployed and how that integrates back into the system, it really has to be one and the same. That feedback loop has to go from feedback from the field and the fast thing you deployed to an immediate uplift of the capability in days, weeks, months, not program cycles and years. That's really how we think about it, and our kind of guiding focus is, if I were back as a Lance Corporal again and forward deployed and I had essentially a monster truck with a rack of GPUs and comms on it, and like, oh man, I would have loved to have just a communications resilient capability. What would I want to do with that thing? How would I want to interact with that? What capabilities would I want that to deploy? And then work with the ecosystem of partners and other defense technology companies to say, let's work together collaboratively to get this integrated into a system in a very relevant speed and out to the warfighter to make a difference.
So kind of taking it back to the start of the conversation, you mentioned, some of the oldest sort of requirements, solicitations, if you will, stretch back into the 80s. And that's a very different world, both in terms of the conflicts, that we were experiencing then, as well as the technology space and how quickly things moved. So what are some of the changes today that are really driving where you guys are taking things, whether it's on the requirement side and sort of the way conflict has evolved, or even on the technology side, and again, like that feedback loop that you're talking about and how you're rethinking and evolving how you're delivering products?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at one of the first programs, Future Combat Systems, and this predates me, I was a young enlisted Marine at the time, but really, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the whole thought was a near-peer competitive threat, tank-on-tank warfare. How do we use robotics to counter Russia and Europe? We're kind of right back there again. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing again. I think now there's a different dimension and different element as we've seen what's happened in Ukraine. But I think if you look at the requirements, really from the 80s all the way into the early 2000s up and really to the last few years, it's been focused on requirements around the specific technology. The vehicle shall, the system shall do this, or how far away can it see, and these very specific requirements-driven, very specific requirements. That's now shifted to capabilities. And when you look at the defense tech ecosystem and all these companies that are developing products, instead of designing to specific requirements that the government or somebody in a program office has outlined, we're building a product that we think is going to be most useful based on the understanding. And I think if you look at the transition of how the government is buying things, they're now transitioning into buying capabilities. It's either going to provide the capability or it's not going to provide the capability. And if it doesn't, we're not going to continue to buy it. And you've seen this big transition from buying systems on either a cost-plus basis or a fixed-price basis, but it's based on the government requirements. And, oh man, those have changed, so now we're going to charge time and material cost-plus to modify the system. That has now shifted to more of an as-a-service model. And I think one of the interesting things, if you look at the value delivery in a typical government contract context, most of the value delivery happens when that system or capability or widget is handed off to the government and that contractor or vendor receives the payment for the delivery of that thing. You see this huge spike in value exchange and value delivery. And then the sustainment of that happens over a long period of time, but the value has really been delivered up front. Hey, you bought the aircraft, you bought the radio, you bought the thing. And the real shift to that as a service model is changing that value delivery time horizon to really long term, where I think as Forterra, and we say this a lot internally, we have to deliver as much, probably even more value in year 5 of a contract or year 5 of a deployment of the system as we did in day 1 when it's new, shiny out of the box, everybody's happy, we get this cool autonomous toy. That excitement and utility that Marine or soldier sees in that system in day 1, we have to continue that in year 5, or we're not going to get paid in year 6, and we're not going to get paid in year 7. And we have to think proactively on what are the features and capabilities and innovations, not just from us, but from other partners we have to integrate that will make that system more relevant. And so I think the big shift is now when we look at the solicitations and acquisitions that come out, it's really looking to industry to form that team of teams to come up with the best solution. And the great thing is we can go raise venture capital dollars. I was saying this to somebody else, that the Department of War and the warfighter are in a unique situation that there are so many people that care. We're here at this conference to talk about their problems and how we solve them, but there are investors, there are companies like Forterra that care so much about their problem that we're willing to spend our own money or our investors' money at risk to solve problems at risk, that you're either going to solve the problem and somebody buys it, or we miss the mark and they buy somebody else's thing. That's a very different environment than what we've ever been in. And we're now starting to see on the other side, these solicitations coming out and saying, hey, somebody show up with the best of breed capability, a team of teams approach, and the best one wins and gets deployed and fielded.
So I want to come back to the VC element, but I want to kind of double click on the partnerships, because I know that's important, and we see more and more shift in that direction where services, whether it's the Army or someone else, is saying, hey, we just want a capability. As you said, we want this turnkey solution that's ready to go. You guys figure it out, and we'll, if it works, we're gonna take that. So when did that moment click with you? I mean, how did that come about? Was that the services kind of telling you we need this, or was there just an organic shift where it became apparent that that's the way forward?
I think it came up on, for us, it came up on a recent contract, and it always comes out, these innovations and things come out of need, of speed and efficiency. But, when they say, hey, when they come to us and say, we need this capability, can you deliver it? And we're able to deliver that, maybe not entirely through our own capabilities internally, but through partners. I think pulling those partners together in a different way, the shift really comes from the government thinking, I have to be the systems integrator of all these things. I'm going to buy a bunch of things and work and force these things together as an integrated solution. That's a lot harder to do through the mechanisms that the government can operate than to go to one or many providers and say, I need you to show up with an integrated solution on your own. And I'm going to buy that product when it's developed as a capability. I'm not going to pay for you to go integrate all the stuff and figure out all the APIs and connect. You go do that, and then give me an integrated solution, and I'll buy that. And that isn't possible, back to the VC point, if there isn't the ability for those companies to fund that development integration on their own dime and then show up with an integrated solution. Yeah. In the old context, where the government's a systems integrator, those contractors are going to say, well, we'll pay me. You want to work with them? We'll pay me. And that entire risk calculation, both on the contractor side and the government side, is really inverted, where we have no problem saying, hey, we can go validate other technology on who we want to integrate and partner with pretty well. It's like, hey, this thing is going to work, or hey, this thing's not. We're going to go proactively integrate and pay for our own engineering expense to make sure that payload or radar or weapon system integrates onto our system. We'll do that on our own dime, no problem, because it's going to make it that much more reliable, capable, or relevant for the warfighter, and increase our chance of the government actually saying this is a relevant product that we're going to buy. And so it's really that team of teams concept and the ability of teams to self-organize, self-fund development, self-fund integration of products, and then show up as a united front to the customer and saying, hey, we have integrated this product and we're willing to sell it to you. Much like the cell phone example, I don't have to go pay Samsung or Apple to go integrate with the thing. They're proactively integrating with those ecosystem of apps and peripherals. That's happening now on the defense side, which is great to see.
And now we'll go to the VC element of it, and I think the thing I'm most interested, but we can get to sort of the weeds if we need to on VC and how it funds exactly what you just said. But there is this shift right now in I'll call it a vibe, or just like the environment where VC in the defense space is hot. It's maybe been like that before, decades ago, but right now it's definitely reached a new sort of peak. And I've been in this space long enough to remember when there were certain companies who didn't want to be in the business of Project Maven, AI in government, things like that. They were like, we need to stay as far away from this as possible because there's reputational things that we just don't want to be associated with. But we've totally seen that pendulum swing in the opposite direction, and VC is a large part of that. Talking to folks earlier in the crowd about Andreessen Horowitz starting up a DC office and really focusing in on that, and there's a number of others. They're not the only ones. So what do you attribute that to, and how has that vibe shift really helped bring wind to your sails to kind of propel you forward and kind of do your mission better?
Yeah, I mean, I think candidly, it's you get a couple trailblazers out there that show the way and really show success. I'd say, Andrew and Palantir are obvious examples where they took this different approach and really went against the grain and showed that you could build a business that can grow at a rate that a venture capitalist can get behind and really align around a mission that is important to national security, and really created this renaissance of investment into defense tech, which was really exciting for me to see. When I joined Forterra in 2021, it was kind of on the upswing. It's now hopefully not peaked, but it's going to continue. I think it has a risk on the other side of it is, we look at it, it used to be 3-4 years ago, program offices or even some of the government labs, the counter to our pitch to the government is like, well, they're VC backed. Are they going to be around in 3 to 4 years? Are they going to really develop a product? Are they really going to sustain? Who knows? Are they really or are they not? And there's been plenty of companies, I'd count us as one, that have really kind of blazed through that and proven that out. What you have in a VC environment is this underwriting of these outsized returns, 100x, 10x, some big outsized returns, which then attracts more VC investment. When you have too much capital accumulating in one area, and we all know, everybody can look up what the defense budget is, it's not an infinite, it's not this massive thing. It's a relatively finite thing.
It feels massive, but...
It feels massive, and I think if you added up all the valuations of every defense tech company out there that's raised money, it's probably multiples of what the entire defense budget is. And
that's right.
So I think there's a opportunity, but also a risk, and I think the risk is really the obligation on this risk is really on the VCs that are investing in these companies. They come in, they see this great hot market. They're going to come in and plow money into this company. That money is going to be used to develop critical technologies that a good number of them are going to get fielded and adopted by warfighters. That company may not have a 10 or 100x return. It may have a 1 or 2 or 3x return. If you look at commercial VC investments, those companies typically go away. They either fold up shop and die, or they get acquired at some pennies on the dollar, and they just kind of disappear. When you're developing technologies that are critical, they've been adopted by the warfighter, they've been trained with, they're in formations, those VCs have an obligation to make sure that if they aren't the 100x return and they're going to continue to support them with future funding, that they responsibly find them a home, either at a prime or another company. And I think the challenge is that, at least as I've seen, and not if there's any VCs in the audience, I'm present company excluded, but they will tend to follow the next hot thing and leave the wreckage and all the difficulty in finding the nice home and everything else to the wayside. And there's nothing that's going to kill this market faster than have some mission critical technologies on venture-backed companies that get folded up and disappear. That will be a real, the music screeching in the acquisition offices the next time a venture-backed company wants to come in with a great AI technology. So it's really making sure that follow through to make sure this industry matures into one that looks like any other industry where you have companies that they're great, they go to the moon, they go public, they kind of hit a double or a single, they get acquired, and we really haven't seen that emerge yet in the shakeout of the industry. But I think it's going to be critically important, just given the interest, demand, and capital. If you look at the amount of investment that's happening, it's upwards of 50, 60 billion a year of investment happening. That's going right into salaries for engineers, developing all these AI approaches. Our engineers at Forterra, that's a massive amount of leverage that the Department of War is getting off of developing the next generation of critical technologies, way more than any of the primes are spending on internal research and development. So making sure that sustains, I think, is really critical.
So just one more thing on that. It sounds like VC, it can be a great thing, but it comes with, some caution. You got to be careful and be thoughtful about it. You're CEO of one of those companies. How are you thinking about navigating that? Is it, having conversations with VCs to, say, hey, this is, it might look bright and shiny, but it's a little different, or is it up to you to navigate it in a different way?
Yeah, I think I found, at least in my life, happiness is a delta between expectation and reality. And you want really happy investors that know what they're getting into and really setting those expectations of how difficult this is of a market. It's a valuable market. It's a worthwhile market. The mission here, I would say, like, in terms of like hiring employees, there's nothing better than to say, look, you can maybe make more money over here, but over here, you get to really have a mission impact. And so I think that's attractive for VCs coming in. It's like, hey, I get the American dynamism and I'm helping national security, but also setting that realization that these things are difficult. This takes time, it's challenging, it's tough, it's not soft, SaaS returns like you've been maybe accustomed to, but if we do this right and you're with us for the long haul. So I think it's really finding the right investor alignment and trying to, so for me, it's been really interviewing as much the VCs and like, do you really understand what you're getting into here? Or are you coming in because it's the next hot market and you're gonna be gone at the next round when your wildest dreams don't come true, and really making sure that there's that mission alignment from the VC side, but then also the commitment to the mission and really understanding of the market, which I would say it's getting better, but really not quite there.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. We've heard no shortage of folks on this stage today talking about some of the transformation underway in the U.S. military, the Army in particular. We heard General Rainey talk about that and what's going on as he departs. But how do you navigate that from the outside in? Again, it kind of goes back to that demand signal, but how does that kind of move your cheese, if at all? And, how do you kind of work with the services as they're changing the way, reorganizing, reforming, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the most critical thing for us as we think about it is making sure we always have touch points with the end user or the warfighter. Like that is going to determine, getting that feedback cycle and not guessing. It's a unique buying environment where the person that uses the system is not the person that's acquiring it, acquiring the system, isn't even the same person that's setting those requirements, and it's not the same person or entity that's funding it. So you have this very complicated sales cycle, but really at the end of the day, it is making sure that your system is, no matter what, as forward deployed, as often used as possible with that user to get those feedback and touch points back into the system and really feed that development cycle. So for us, as we think about this very complicated, our customer is complicated, they're important, and we've got to really engage with them on multiple fronts from, Capitol Hill to the Pentagon to the program office, always making sure that we're anchoring it on what is that, how is the end user, I keep coming back to it, the Lance Corporal in the infantry battalion, or the Army Ranger, or the soldier in the fires unit. How would they need to use the system? What is their feedback? Tell us the bad. Where is it broken? How would you change this differently? And then having the mechanism to pull that feedback in, not having to wait on a contract vehicle or the next little bit of funding to come in, but immediately bring that back in without even being asked or told, right back into feedback and say, hey, is this how you wanted it? Does this fit your bill? That is only going to make it more relevant. And then as we work all the other pieces of, as we've talked about, the more willingness to buy technology and deploy it quickly, that expectation of what they're getting, they're going to be able to go back down to the unit and say, hey, does the thing do exactly what we're thinking it's going to do? Or are these requirements relevant? They have that well-based expectation because, again, expectations, reality. You want to make sure that customer always has firmly grounded expectations on what is the current capability of the system as it relates to that 18 to 25-year-old who's going to have to interact with it every day. We want to make sure that it's not going to be like many of the technologies that I saw. And I had a unique perspective going from my first deployment was in 2003 with 1980s technology. It was all the Cold War gear. And then back again in 2007, there were billions of dollars that invested in high-tech technologies that are now sitting buried under a burn pit somewhere in Western Iraq that were never supported or never touched. How do we make sure that the technology is always going to be relevant by the time it hits the field in the warfighter?
So let's bring that into, practice, you guys won a pretty awesome contract in August, and you guys are going to be able to rapidly integrate and deliver commercial autonomous mobility in Army formations as part of that prototype contract. Is that a result of that sort of end user feedback and sort of working with them, or is this an opportunity to do things like that? Where does that kind of play in?
I think it's an opportunity to kind of think through how the Army is going to acquire at scale the next generation of both base vehicle with autonomy integrated with payloads, and think about this more in scaling. We had another contract, I unfortunately can't talk about it now, but we're deploying, we have deployed just in the last 5 months, 105 autonomous systems into a combat environment, doing a mission that's being used daily. And so that was a very rapid from contract signing to 105 systems deployed in a matter of about 4.5 months. This is kind of the next phase to say, okay, that was that quick, fiber optic spool solution. How do we then think about how do we integrate that into a full production system for the Army? So I think it's an opportunity to really think through the next wave of production.
And then just last thought, we're running out of time, but as you go from there, how do you think about scaling? Because that's another massive challenge, going from the prototype and integrating that feedback and then building something at scale.
Yeah, if you can only do n=1 of something or n=10, and again, that was probably the first 15 years of the company's history, showing up to demo after demo, demonstrating one requirement after another, pulling all of those capabilities into a system, handing it off to an end user, saying, does this work for you? Yes, okay, great, let me go build 105 of those. That transition from single prototype into scaling, it can't take months or weeks or years. It has to be a seamless transition. So for us, that looks like very tightly integrated production and engineering teams. I mean, they all sit together. I mean, I kind of sit out there with them a lot of the times where the lead engineer is sitting next to the person that's producing it. We are revving designs as we're building, but then having the commitment on the back end to make sure that you're creating some tech debt in doing that, but you're making the onus is on you to, as far forward in the field you have to reach to go remove that tech debt or fix that thing that you had to do it quick and you had to make the thing work. You got to make sure you're on the back end, making sure you're sustaining and upgrading in the field. So we kind of think about it, that continuous life cycle is the thing that allows you to produce quickly at scale while at the same time innovating, is you got to keep those teams very tightly aligned.
Josh, thanks so much for your time. Fantastic conversation. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Great conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take the next few minutes to enjoy a